Welcome to this webinar. Privacy is optional. It's quite an interesting topic. So, without further ado, let's begin. With me here is Oluwadamilola. She's going to be my co-host. While we wait for other people to join, we can just go through the agenda for the day. All right. So, just like I mentioned earlier, we are talking about data privacy, and among it's Data Privacy Week. So, we know that data privacy involves, the legal and ethical way of managing personal information, talking about people's names, emails, IP addresses, behavior data, all of these, how it's being collected, how it's being stored, and how it's being used. So that's basically what data privacy is all about. Talking about transparency, data minimalization, secure platforms, compliance with regulations, things like that. And I know you might ask, what is Data Privacy Week, or what is this in about? So this is an annual international campaign that's typically held in the last week of January and the first week of February, aimed at raising awareness about the online privacy, educating individuals, and even managing personal data, your personal data, people's personal data. So this is a way of encouraging businesses to adopt various transparent data best practices. And this wonderful webinar today is brought by Cyber Plural. And you might ask, what do we do? So basically, we do everything cyber related security activities. So talking about pen testing, monitoring your network, compliance, data protection, everything. We also help individuals to protect their data, train them on best practices, and basically cybersecurity in general. So we're going to talk about us much more later. So let's dive into this wonderful session. So with us here, we have our wonderful speakers, very, very awesome people. I'll let my co-host do the honor. Dami, you're up.
Thank you, Ade, and hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're so pleased to welcome our speakers for today's webinar session. I'll just start by sharing a brief look at their backgrounds before we begin. So here with us today, we're honored to have Mr. Daniel, a cybersecurity professional with over a decade of experience in information security, threat management, and incident response. He currently serves as the head of the Incident Handling Department at the Nigeria Computer Emergency Response Team under the Office of the National Security Advisor. In this role, he leads national efforts to identify and mitigate cybersecurity incidents, strengthen resilience, and foster collaboration with both local and international stakeholders. So we're delighted to have him share his expertise with us today.
That is awesome. That's a good one. Welcome, Mr. Daniel. We'd really love to hear from you in the coming minutes. Welcome. You can just unmute to say hi, Mr. Daniel.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. So our second speaker, she is the manager of the Threat Intelligence and Hunting at MTN Group, and she leads an effort in threat intelligence research, the program development, and strategy implementation. All this to strengthen the enterprise-wide security resilience. She has deep expertise spanning threat intelligence production, standard operating procedures, threat hunting, and even open source intelligence, which is called OSINT, incident response, and digital forensics. So that's a lot. She's been featured in the Maltagos Women in OSINT Spotlight and has co-authored Nigerian's National Cyber Threat Focus Report, not once, but twice. This is a publication that informs national cybersecurity priorities. Her career aspiration has rooted in advancing responsible cyber threat intelligence sharing and expanding the threat intelligence and hunting workforce through mentorship and training. Who am I talking about? Mrs. Elizabeth Olayede Olajumoke. Unfortunately, she's not here yet, but I'm pretty much sure she'll be joining us very, very shortly. So let's wait for her. She's gonna be here. And now let's move to our third speaker.
Yes. So, as our third guest, again, we are happy to have Mr. Samuel with us here today, an information security and governance risk and compliance professional with nearly 5 years of experience across banking, fintech, the public sector, and telecoms. He has led multinational country compliance initiatives, trained over 1,000 professionals, and holds several industry recognized certifications, including CISM, PCI QSA, and ISO 27000, and one lead implementer, to name a few. His current focus is secure by design systems and governance of emerging technologies such as AI. And we're really excited to hear his insights in today's session.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
All right, that's a good one. That's a lot. And I'm really happy because it seems like we're going to be learning a lot from our speakers today. So, also, Damilola, would you just give us the run through of the agenda?
Yes, so I'd like to thank our speakers once again. Thank you very much for joining us again. We're very pleased to have you with us. So now we've met our speakers, I'll quickly go over how today's webinar will run. So we'll kick things off with some prepared questions for our speakers, and then we'll leave time for a live Q&A and like an open discussion for anyone who has any burning questions at the end. So please feel free to send your questions to the chat anytime, and we'll be able to cover that during the Q&A.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so I think it's time to hear from our speakers. Let me see. Mr. Daniel, can you just tell us what you know about data privacy, just in a minute or two? I would really love to hear your voice. Thank you. Mr. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies where I am currently in. You might be hearing some sounds. I'm currently in a training, so I decided to run out of the training just to be part of this session. So you might be hearing some background noise. Okay, so about privacy, when we talk about privacy or data privacy, we are talking about the security of our data, knowing where our data is, knowing who is accessing our data, and then ensuring that it's not being misused by whatever reasons, and then ensure that also the people who are processing our data are doing it lawfully. In simple terms, that is what I think that data privacy is all about. And then, just to link it to what the theme of today's program is all about, privacy being operational, it tend to bring us to that areas where we begin to ask, the question of how privacy is embedded in our day-to-day, activities, the kind of tools we use in our workflow, even as far as in our incident response. And so if we can confidently or clearly determine that it is embedded in these areas, then we can say that at least there is privacy within our environment. Thank you.
All right, that's a very beautiful one. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. You mentioned privacy being embedded when it comes to tools and operations. I think that takes me to the very first question. So, when a privacy incident occurs, so what are the operational gaps that are usually exposed first in your line of experience? Can you just tell us a bit on that?
Okay. Okay. So and let me just begin by saying that if you can, for example, if you cannot quickly answer questions like what data was affected, whose data, it was, and then what you did to protect those data. So it means there are some gaps, in the organization or in the process. So when privacy occurs, what clearly shows up first of all is that everybody is confused. There's a kind of confusion. First, it begins to expose how unprepared the organization really is. So because most organizations lack the adequate preparation, and then you will actually know how prepared you are when an incident happens, because on paper, everyone thinks they are very, very much prepared because they think they have a policy regarding data protection. But when a true incident happens, you will actually know whether you are prepared, because most organizations do not know, do not even test some of those policies. So I think when a privacy incident occurred, one of the first operational gap is the lack of preparation. We show very clearly, because I think most organizations, they don't even know on time. They don't even know on time. And even if they finally find out, so the next question will now be, so what data was actually affected? These are questions that majority of the company organizations cannot even answer. And nobody can even provide a clear answer as to what was stolen, what was actually affected during an incident. And then you begin to see that everybody is now confused, and then there is a kind of leadership gap, because they are not prepared. They are not able to determine who should actually be in charge of this process. Is it the IT department? Is it the legal people? Is it the management? So that is why I said what exposed first is that lack of preparation. So in essence, a privacy incident doesn't just expose leaked data during an incident. It exposes how unprepared the organization really is. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. It doesn't just exposes the incident, it exposes the preparation. Okay, that's a good one. All right. Let's go to our second speaker. Dami.
Yes. Okay, over to you, Mr. Samuel. Before I ask the first question, if you could please just, in a few words, just explain or describe what data privacy means to you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Dami, and thanks to the Cyber Plural team for the opportunity. All right. So, what does data privacy mean? Maybe to me as an individual, I'd probably based on what I do as someone who functions in compliance. Typically, if you pick the English words, data privacy, you're just trying to ensure that, data, that's information that's most likely has now been translated into a meaningful thing is sort of protected. So everything included in that information, not data per se, the confidentiality, integrity, availability of it, it's well kept, right? You can look at it in another way to say it's typically how personal information, information of individuals, PIIs, informations that could be implicating when it gets into the wrong hands, how those informations are collected, how they are used, how they are shared, how they are stored, and also even how they are disposed, right? So how do you do all of this in a way that you are still respecting people's rights, you are respecting their expectation, you are going beyond what one regulation or act somewhere tells you to do, right? So that's the essence of data privacy. So those 5 practical questions, we need to ask ourselves those questions when it comes to the collection of the data, more like the purpose, right? Are we doing what needs to be done? What data do we actually need? Who can access the data in terms of access control? How long should we keep it? And then, what happens when it's no longer needed? So all of this forms what data privacy is typically all about, right? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, sir. You've mentioned some of the steps that maybe organizations or ourselves need to take or put into action in order for our data to be protected, right? So this brings me on to my first question, which is why do many organizations have strong privacy policies but weak day-to-day privacy practices?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dami. Yeah. So, why would organizations typically have, strong privacy policy, but then when it comes to the actual implementation on a day-to-day basis, that now becomes lacking? The issue, largely for me, I think it's the fact that, well, maybe we should even start from what is, a policy per se. Typically policy is always expected to be tied to management. A brief definition would be that policy is, let's say, management intent or intention regarding a particular domain area. So in this instance, the focus is data privacy. So if you have maybe a data or a privacy policy, it means that is our management intention regarding privacy, right? Now, if we're unable to cascade that intention into actual practice, definitely means there's a problem. And you see this problem most times when most organizations begin to treat privacy policy or policies as, let's say, regulatory artifacts. So they look at it as something that we just need to put together in order to, be compliant or meet a particular requirement or meet a particular regulation. So they don't look at it as an operational tool, because if it's what management is saying, no, this is what we need to do regarding privacy of information, privacy of data, and you're unable to cascade that into daily operation, then there is a problem, right? So issue of treating it as a regulatory artifact, we see organizations these days, they begin to create policies, typically just for audits, so just audit processes, they look at it as a checklist issue, right? So the thing with that is when it comes to translating it into day-to-day practice, it becomes largely, something difficult, right? So another issue, while we would see these instances, is in terms of ownership. So in as much as policies are supposed to be management intention, someone needs to be accountable for that policy in order for it to become like a daily habit or activity in the organization. So when there is a lack of clear accountability, what that means is privacy now becomes everybody's responsibility in the organization, whereas in practice, it's more like it's nobody's responsibility. Why? because there is no clear accountability as to who ought to ensure that that policy is implemented, who ought to ensure that that policy is reviewed, who ought to ensure that that policy is, up to date based on, first and foremost, the requirement of the business at that point in time, and also maybe the requirements of a regulation or a law around protecting of data, around privacy, right? So for me, that would be the major reason. First and foremost, when you treat your policy as a regulatory artifact, NDPC comes and just show them we have a data privacy policy. I know they teach you, you're in compliance, right? But then when it now comes to fine-tuning it into what you do on a daily basis, it now becomes a major issue. So that is one. And then the issue of lack of responsibility. I think that would be the major for me, based on what I've seen so far. Someone who, live from the audit part and also even the implementation part of most of these policies. So I think those would be my two major reasons why organizations typically would have a perfect policy on paper, but when it comes to day-to-day practices, practicing that policy now becomes very weak.
All right. Thank you for that. So that was a really nice insight that you shared with us there. I think a couple of people have just joined the call just now. I just want to say that we're currently in the Q&A session with our guest speakers. So if you do have any questions, please don't forget to write them in the chat.
All right. Thank you very much, Dami. And yes, thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. That was a whole lot. And I think our third speaker just joined. Yep. Okay. Please give her a round of applause. Our third speaker is here. Miss Elizabeth Oleyede, welcome. We have been expecting you. Thank you. It's nice to have you here. All right. Mr. Sama said a lot, and I'm actually still trying to wrap my head around a whole lot of things. But my next question is for Mr. Daniel. So, Mr. Sama said privacy is not a regulatory artifact, it's not a checklist, and it becomes largely difficult to translate in the long run. Very good. So, Mr. Daniel, I'd like to just spin this up a little bit to the incident response focus. So my question is, what does a truly privacy focused incident response looks like? Not in theory, but in execution. Can you just shed more light on that?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So a truly privacy focused incident response, I would say, is calm, because when you are prepared enough, it brings you to a point of calmness where roles and responsibilities are well understood by the team. There is no confusion about who is in charge, and there is no confusion about who to contact or what to do or who to report to. So everything is well laid out. It is the processes are all well laid out. So there is an existing SOP. So it's calm and then it's fast. A privacy focused incident response is fast, because the faster you respond to an incident, the lesser the cost. And so if the faster you respond, you contain that particular privacy incident, the more damaging the impact will be. So it is expected that everything you do is fast. And that is where also the issue of detection comes into play. Because if you have enough visibility, you will also be you will also be able to detect on time, and then be able to respond as fast as possible. I will also say that a truly privacy-focused incident response is also well coordinated. Is well coordinated. So the teams, the relevant teams, or the relevant individuals who are part of the team understand themselves, they understand that their role, they know what to do. And like I said before, the roles and responsibilities are well spelled out. So when an incident happens, the response plan is then activated, and then every responsible individual will play their own role. So the moment an incident is suspected, the focus then will just shift from just not just the system that is affected, but the focus automatically shifts to the people's data that is at stake. From that moment an incident is declared, personal data is now treated as a priority asset, not something not an afterthought, just the way we experience it when there is an incident. People don't care about what data is lost. They care about more about their reputation, protecting their reputation, than thinking about how to contain or safeguard the data of those of their clients. So a privacy-focused response is not just about, from the incident in practicality or in execution. It's not just about us stopping the incident. It is about us protecting while you stop the incident. So while you are dealing with the incident, you want to protect, the people first of all, while you try to stop that incident. So first of all, in execution and not in theory, you have to kind of assess, let me put it this way. The access to those data is first of all contained immediately. That is the first thing. You have to first of all contain access to those data. You have to first of all determine who taught this data, who accessed this data, and then how did they manage to access this data, and whether access to the data is still active. So is the first step you need to do. So you have to contain access to those data immediately, and at the same time, the right people should already be on the table as in the moment an incident is declared. The security team should be there, even the data protection officer should be there, even the legal should also be on the table, and then the management team or the relevant management team should be there. So in that case, there is no confusion about ownership. And then the next thing you do is that the organization quickly establishes what data is involved and who are those that are actually affected. Because that, if you are able to answer these two critical questions, that is what will drive every decision that we follow afterwards. And then of course, the next thing you have to do also is to ensure that the relevant people are notified. So notification is in a way prepared very early enough, so it's not something you rush at the last minute. And then when you want to communicate to the client or to the victim and the rest of them, you have to be honest and clear about what you are telling them. So because what we have found over time is that people try to minimize the impact in their communication, but not forgetting that, because they want to protect reputation. But when you are not honest about or clear about your communication, to the owners of those data, you will lose that particular trust. And so most importantly, also everything you are doing is documented in real time. Every step you are taking is documented. So decisions you are taking is documented. The timelines are all documented. All the actions that is being taken are well documented, because accountability matters a lot, as much as recovery. So in as much as we want to recover, accountability is very, very critical. So that is why everything and every process, that you go through during a privacy incident response must be documented. So in practice, privacy-focused response means, that you protect the people first before talking about maybe considering the regulators, and then your reputation should be last. Most people might disagree with this, but that is what companies or organizations put first. But that should be, if it is privacy focused, your reputation should be the last. You have to protect the people first. And so you have to do that. You will be able to accomplish this if you are well, prepared. And lastly, all these things, evidence must be preserved, without unnecessarily, exposing personal data. So when during incident response, you have to be mindful of exposing personal data, because you are trying to respond to an incident. So that the response itself, does not create a new privacy risk. So you have to be very, very careful and then preserve all the necessary evidence. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. That was a lot. Yeah, accountability is critical. The evidence must also be preserved, and then communication should not be rushed. Yes, I totally agree with you. So let's hear from the threat hunting perspective.
Thank you again, Mr. Daniel. That was very helpful. Staying with the operational side of privacy, this next question will be for Miss Elizabeth. Thank you once again for joining us. Before I shoot my next question, we would love to hear from you what data privacy means to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I can see that there's no need for video, so I'll just keep it the way I met it. All right, so privacy is not an end product. Some organizations treat privacy as an end product, which is not. They treat privacy as a checklist to meet certain certification, to meet certain audits and all of that, but it is not. Privacy starts when you start building a product or a service. Privacy starts when you start building. It's not an end product. You should build with privacy in mind. So when it comes to privacy in full operations, we're looking at how to implement in-depth defense on certain systems or devices that may be hosting personal identifiable information, critical information, financial information, and all. I've seen myself and Hamza, we do track what is going on in Nigeria and West Africa. We'll pick up organizations that all they want to do is to deploy a feature, deploy a service without having privacy in mind, until the government slam them a fine before they come into realization that privacy is actually operational. So I would say to you that what privacy means in operation means that you build with privacy in mind. You don't allow privacy to slip out of your hand and mess up with your reputation. Because once privacy slips out of an organization hand, it mess up with their reputation, it messes up with their revenue, it messes up with quite a lot of things. Their stock exchange, their stock thing will drop and all of that. We've seen it across board, not only in Africa, but across the globe. So I would say build with privacy in mind and ensure that you identify systems that are critical to your privacy, and ensure in-depth security defense, implementation of in-depth security defense on those systems. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So yes, privacy is not an end product, and we should build with privacy in mind. I love that. So we're going to dig a little deeper into threat hunting, as our theme for this webinar is privacy is operational. My first question for you, Miss Elizabeth, is if data privacy is operational, what should threat hunters be actively looking for beyond the traditional malware and intrusions?
All right. Was it 2 days ago? There was an article published by the Register. You can read it up. It's titled something around patch or die. Patch or you die, patch or you perish, something along that direction. And we've seen that cyber incidents have moved beyond traditional malware and intrusions. They've also moved past that level and now onto vulnerability exploitation. So back to where I stopped around identifying critical systems holding data that need to be that needs privacy to be upheld. Another thing when we're hunting is that whatever you have on the system, ensure that your system is up to date. Ensure that your system is up to date, especially for vulnerability that is remotely exploitable, and for vulnerability that are exploited in the wild with their proof of concept publicly available. I'm speaking on this from experience around vulnerability intelligence. I'm not talking about vulnerability management. I'm talking about vulnerability intelligence. Also, when we talk about threat hunting, I believe that some of you might have known what is going on with Notepad++. Between yesterday and today, it's been a messy environment for people that have compromised Notepad++ in their environment, especially the enterprise environment. And Rapid7 has been so good and kind to the global organizations to release indicator of compromise. So how do we go about that? So we go there and hunt based on the information that we have. All right. Also, when looking at threat hunting for privacy, we should not forget, because most times we look deep and forget the surface. The surface will actually serve as an initial access. All right. And when we're talking about the surface, we're talking about the attack surface management. This is very key. I'm going to be using recent events just to back up my explanation. Last week, we saw over 800,000 telnet servers exposed on internet. And believe me sincerely, we've got a lot in Africa. And when you bring it down home, you should know the numbers will be high as well. I mean to Nigeria. So what are we saying there? We're talking about attack surface management. Telnet, we all know Telnet is not secure, right? But then we still have stubborn organization out there using Telnet. And imagine you have your Telnet open on port 23 and it is actually open and it's remotely accessible. Then you know what that means. Your attack surface management is poor. So that brings us back to databases. Was that December? There was another one around Mongo Bleed. Mongo Bleed was everywhere. It was bleeding awfully around December period. And we saw exposed database outside there that have not been patched for the longest of the longest. So when we're talking about operationalizing privacy, now we're bringing it back home to say wherever your data that need to be kept with privacy in mind, secure with privacy in mind, don't joke with one, vulnerability intelligence. Number two, don't joke with attack surface management. Port 22 is open and you are able to brute force into it. That's the end of the matter. You know, port 23 is open and you are able to access it. That's the end of the matter. You've got vulnerability that are exploitable in by remotely, you know, just by network and does not need any authentication. And the proof of concept is out there publicly. That's the end of that database that you have facing the internet. And I'm not saying that every database that contain personal identifiable information or other personal information, critical sensitive data out there should not be facing the internet. There are some of it that warrant facing the internet. But when they are facing the internet, what are the security measures put in place? The last but not, I think I will have two more. One is vulnerability intelligence, attack surface management. Then the third one I'm going to add is API integration. We've seen this over and over. I mean, we've got reports, we've got records around API integration with a database, speaking with another, communicating with another one. And then this is all used for deployment of services that the organization is actually providing, which is apt, right? It is good. But then if you look backward, if your API integration is bad, then your data is not safe. We've seen how API communication has been hijacked and a lot of money has been lost. We've seen that in our ecosystem here. And then sometimes it is maneuver into another database, another malicious database, and that's the end of your data. Then the next thing you will see is one threat actor posting your data on the dark web and saying all of that. So I want to say that API security is a big deal because we can't work alone, and that's why we need API integration, right? We can't continue working alone. So API integration is part. When I'm looking at my threat hunting, I need to hunt for API lapses, you know, flaws. There are so many API tokens and keys outside there. Go to GitHub. You'll see a lot. If you know how to use GitHub for threat hunting, threat intelligence, you see a lot of that in outside there. And many of these things may not, maybe not all. Let me not use the word many. Some of them might be actually valid. And once it reaches the hand of the bad guys, that's the end. Last but not the least, that I'm going to be searching for with privacy in operation in mind, operationalizing privacy is looking within my environment for local accounts that may still be active. I'm gonna give you an example. One organization that we were tracking, myself and Hamza were tracking one organization because they were breached and all of that. And at the end of the day, what we found out was that they have an account that is still active, although the user of that account has left the organization. I'm talking about provisioning and deprovisioning. Most of those things, they look simple, but when it is not securely guarded, it can lead to a mess. It can be messy. To cut the long story short, the local account was infected with malware, with InfoStealer. And at the end of the day, it got into the wrong hand. And then the threat actor decided to, let me even check what is going on. And he pressed it in and it was inside. It was inside a pool of data. A pool, or let me not say pool, an ocean of data. And then it has exfiltrated it and then posted it and said, oh, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, 4 organization has been breached and have their data. They are real. So when we are looking at this thing, we're also looking at how to manage user accounts, provisioning and deprovisioning. Okay, with all of this thing in mind, don't forget, if they are not regularly haunted, if you don't hunt for all of this thing across your organizations, I mean, it can get messy and privacy can be breached and can lead to damage. It can lead to break in trust by customers. It can lead to fine. I'm sure Nigeria is still coming up in fine, but when you talk about fine, you're talking about the European countries, you know, and all of that. They don't take privacy for granted. There was even a particular one with Grok right now around sexually manipulation of something around it. And they don't take all of these things for granted. So if I am a threat hunter, I should have vulnerability intelligence in mind while ensuring that privacy is secure. I'm securing the bag, the privacy bag. I also ensure that the attack surface management. Meanwhile, exposed port is just one of the many techniques of attack surface management that you can do in your organization. I will keep that in check as well, continuous checking. And then number 3, I will ensure that API integration, no token it outside there. And you can't be 100% secure, but then try your best. All right. And then the last but not the least is that I'm going to continually check provisioning and deprovisioning and ensuring the privileged access or role-based access thing authorization to ensure that nobody leaves my organization and the account everywhere has not been decommissioned. It can lead to something messy. All right. I think for now I'll stop there. I can go on, but I'll stop there.
That was really interesting, Miss Elizabeth. Thank you so much for that. That was so much to unpack there within threat hunting. So we'll move on to the next set of questions. But before that, I also want to remind everyone that you can ask any questions. You can just drop them in the chat function on this meeting. We would love to hear your questions from these amazing responses that we've had so far.
Yep, thank you very much, Damilola. And also thank you very much, Miss Elizabeth. You said a lot. I was trying to jot down some things, but it's a lot. Probably I have to go through the recording to learn more. And I think the next question is for Mr. Sam. And Miss Elizabeth talked about operationalizing privacy. And I think most people actually say this thing is a thing for management. And I don't know why. So, Mr. Sam, I'd like to ask, how does business pressure, speed, growth, convenience undermine operational privacy controls?
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Adeoluwa. Yeah, so I would say this is a very important question because at this point in time, we'll get to understand why good intentions consistently fail in real organization, right? Because at a practical level, privacy controls introduces friction into business processes. You know, Elizabeth just mentioned now that, things around role-based access control, provisioning and deprovisioning and all of that, right? So some organization, some institution sees that as, friction being introduced into their business process. Privacy controls will typically require people to, it requires us to typically just pause. We need to pause We need to verify things. We need to document. We need to restrict access. We need to do a redesign of workflows. You don't want to use what data, right? Business pressure on the other side is typically opposite. Business would reward speed, it would reward volume, it would reward outcome most of the time. And when these two typically collide, I can tell you for a fact that privacy would lose if it were to be a battle, right? So privacy would definitely lose unless that organization has matured to a point where they've embedded these privacy controls into their operations, right? So it's not as though I would just like to say what typically just undermines privacy is not open resistance. It's not as though people are carrying placards in the organization and saying, no, the number of times you are doing user access review is too much. Why do you have to disable my accounts because I've left department A to department B and all of that, right? It isn't that open resistance. It's mostly normalization of exceptions, right? And when I say normalization of exception, take for instance, when speed turns control into like temporary obstacle. You have maybe let's say fintech whose business strategy is to be first movers. So what they are looking at for like the likes of OP, I'm just citing an example here. They want to be the first to chunk a product into the market, right? They want to be the first to launch that product. They want to be the first to onboard, massive customer databases. They want to be market expansion is one of what they are looking out for. At that point in time, when you are introducing privacy checks, the team would see it as a delay. Tell them to come do DPIs, data privacy impact assessment, right? Tell them to come and do consent reviews. Tell them to do maybe even vendor assessments, particularly if it's a solution that interfaces with a third party, right? So at that point in time, because their focus is speed, business speed, right? They would see those privacy controls as delays, right? So they would want to postpone every of these controls with the intention to fix it later, right? Now, the issue is that systems and process typically solidifies quickly. Before you know it, that shortcut that they've done becomes operational. And then if you need people to revisit what needs to be done, it's like, come on, this product is working fine. We're the first to launch. We have declined database already, or the numbers. Why do we have to go into the? Why do we have to go back to the books to do every of these privacy checks, right? So that's one thing. Another way that I would say maybe business pressure, growth, or convenience would typically undermine operational privacy control is in the area of if you still look at it from aspect of growth, right? Because you're considering business growth now, growth typically would want to encourage over collection, right? It encourages over retention of data. You have a software development organization or a financial institution. For them, faster growth would create a fear of future limitation, particularly in the area of data. So you see them when it comes to collecting data, they want to collect more than necessary, and in quotes, you can say just in case. For them, they say, okay, instead of just getting people's name, email addresses, how about we get where they live? How about we get their BVN? And the awareness is low out there. So people just provide all of this without questioning why. Why are you collecting this? So at that point in time, for the growth, they are looking into the future. Business needs to grow. How about as we're building this client base, let's get as much as necessary. We'll use it for analytics in the future. We can use it for marketing. We use it for monetization and all of that, right? So retention period also become extended or typically ignored. You are collecting the data and you told someone, oh, we would ensure this data we've collected goes through our data disposal policy every 5 years. I audit PTI DSS, and most times when I'm asking organization, your data retention for account data says maybe 15 years. Now, typically every year is a 15-year in quotes. And I'm asking you, can I see evidence of data disruption for 2025? Can I see for 2024? And it becomes a problem, right? Because for them, what they are looking out for is, see, we've collected this data, we're using it. When it comes to retention, they don't care at that point in time, right? Another thing is convenience most times would, that's business convenience now, would most time weaken access control, it weakens accountability also, right? Because you will see convenience in the sense that people are sharing accounts. You go to a bank, the front decks, I think this instance play out, I audit most of them. And then you see front decks, people are typically sharing accounts. Why? Oh, it's easier for the IT team to just create this account for them to use, right? So at that point in time, there's weakness in access control. That is your operational privacy controls being diminished to a large extent, right? So when it comes to that proper role-based access control, it becomes an issue. And I can literally just also link this back to what Elizabeth mentioned earlier, right? So organizations now create their environments where people have access to sensitive information, but then accountability becomes a problem. So there's a lot of examples that one can cite here where business pressures, business speed, business growth, business convenience begins to undermine operational privacy. Quite a number of examples. If time permit, I would have just been going on and on, right? But then just to put a summary to it, business pressure typically don't break privacy because organizations don't care. That's one thing to note. Business pressures, business speed, business growth will typically break privacy because privacy controls are not built in to survive those pressures, right? Especially when you don't factor it into what you do at the onset of that business process or business engagement, right? So I'll just stop here. I'll stop here because of time, right?
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. Yep, that was a lot. You said we should ensure data minimization, and then there's a need for a proper look into the data retention, the disposal policy, and most of all, accountability is necessary. That's a good one. Thank you very much for that. Please also don't forget, if you have questions, ensure you just drop it in the chat box and we'll get right to it. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to our next speaker.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Samuel, for that. That was really insightful. We'll now be moving on to incident response. So from the last question, we kind of got an idea of how business pressures can sometimes break that privacy. So, Mr. Daniel, the next question is for you. How do response teams determine intent, whether data was viewed, copied, or abused, rather than just accessed?
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the last speaker. How do response team determine intent? Usually, to determine intent is always one of the most difficult tasks, but it usually start with evidence. So is determining intent start with evidence. It's not something you assume, just as most people do, because when they see when there's an incident, people just assume, but it takes a lot of forensic work and a lot of correlation of logs for you to be able to determine intent of how that was viewed or copied of abuse. somebody access the data does not take or usually look out for is what happened after that access. So we look beyond access, but after the access, what happened? First, from the incident response perspective, what we do is we try to analyze logs and then analyze users' activity. So we want to determine, okay, what accounts were used, and then what files were opened in the process. And then we also ask questions, look out for things like, okay, how long, when access was granted, how long did the session last? So, and then whether actions were consistent with normal work patterns. So you have to look at all these activities as it surrounds the user. So which of course will take some time for you to determine. And then next thing that you do in this process is that now you look at some you look for behavioral signals, like, okay, were there bulk downloads by the accounts, and then was there unusual search queries. You begin to look out for unusual search queries, and then you begin to consider things like file exports, were any files exported, and then were there any screenshots taken, or were there attempts to move data outside the approved systems, maybe to another system. So these patterns matters more than just a single login. And then the team also tries to a kind of correlate all the system events across all the platforms. Like you have to look at the database logs. You have to look at the application logs, and then you have to look at even the endpoint activity, and as well as the network traffic. So when you are able to correlate all these systems events across all these multiple all these different platforms, intent becomes clearer when actions line up across all these systems. So intents will now become clearer. So but then we also consider a situation whereby maybe an insider is involved, or maybe there's a third party involvement. So if insider or third parties are involved, so the response team will now have to review the role permissions versus that actual behavior. So legitimate access, used in an unusual way, is always a strong indicator of misuse. So which is now a signal. And finally, after doing all of these things, all of this, going through all this procedure, so you will now have to have a kind of confidence level. So you reach a point of certainty. So it's no longer an assumption. So you are now certain to a certain confidence level, which of course is now then documented, you can now categorically say that, okay, this was, actually intent of the attacker or the malicious actor. So in privacy response, the response team, we don't actually need, go after except maybe it go after all this courtroom, proof, especially when you know that you are not going to, to court. But you must show you must show reasonable and evidence-based assessment of whether data was actually viewed, or copied or even abused. So in a nutshell, intent is determined, in terms of incident response. Intent is determined by the pattern, and then you look at the context, and then you corroborate all the evidences, that you have, not just, by doing a kind of guesswork or denial of certain activities which actually happen, or you just try to live in denial that this thing is not it, whereas there is nothing, no evidence to, to back it up. So let me just end there because of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Daniel. It shows how looking beyond is more of like analyzing logs and behavioral signals and patterns. We will now be moving on to the next question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. I think one thing I was able to pick was intent starts with evidence and not assumption. I think that's a good word of advice. So we've been talking about Nigeria. Let's take it a little bit outside the shores of Nigeria. I think the next question is for Miss Elizabeth. So quickly, what role could regional threat intelligence sharing play in identifying emerging data privacy risks across Africa? And then you can also tell us what's currently preventing this particular strategic collaboration.
All right. So when we talk about cross or regional threat intelligence sharing, it's key, right? Because we've watched some things closely happening in Europe, North America, and the Asia continent. And some of them are now replicating themselves in Africa, particularly around the North African side. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because even though we may speak different language, and those are some of the barriers actually, language is a big deal, okay? And that is why we always call for a centralized threat intelligence dashboard, threat intelligence language. And that's why we have those structures like the STIX and OpenCTI and the likes that we use to communicate. I mean, I belong to some of this intelligence sharing places, and those are the expression languages that we use, irrespective of wherever you are coming from and all of that. So I think that answers the second question. But then I want to say that whatever happened, there is a proverb in my language, Yoruba, but I will not say it, right? But what it explicitly means is that whatever that happens to your neighbor, there is a high potential that is going to happen to you. All right. So, and that is why we need regional threat intelligence sharing. Most times, it's not just about us, right? It's about people around. And whenever something happened to one, especially in an industry section, um, it can happen anywhere. I'm going to give you a very good example of that. So 2 years ago, we coughed on a particular threat actor attacking telecommunication, not in Africa, actually. It was attacking them in Asian countries and the European countries. And one of the cybersecurity vendors, they were very good enough to share some indicator of compromise. In our opinion, you will say that the probability that that indicator of compromise will be used again is slim, right? But never say never. So we pick up that, and then as part of the threat hunting thing that we do, we decided to schedule a query search. I mean, a custom search that can run for more than a year. We wanted it to run for more than a year. That was in 2024. In 2025, we received an alert from nowhere, an alert that came in from the query that we set up in 2024, over a year ago, as at that time. That was last year. And it happened to be very true on one of our servers. I'm saying this because I really want you to pick one or two things, right? And that was where it all started. We thought that this threat actor can never come to Africa. It's always in the Asian countries and the European country. It can't come to Africa, let alone come to West Africa, let alone move into other part of the country, other part of the continent. But lo and behold, it actually came. So at the end of the day, it was remediated and all of that. So now let me ask you a question. Of course, I'm going to answer it. If we had not gotten the intel at that time, and we have not acted on it, what would have happened to us? A breach, a mess, right? And that is why I say it is very important that whatever happened to your neighbor, there is a high potential that is going to happen to you. So don't joke with those intel. And it is real. And it is very, very real. So one of the things that have been a hurdle is language. Most times we don't speak Mandarin. The vendor might be speaking something and all of that, but I know that vendors are helping us with English nowadays, and we don't have to disturb ourselves. But if you are like me, that go around the dark web to look for all sorts of things, you will see different languages. Of course, I know with the head of translator, we are able to translate and move over the hurdle. These are some of the things that we can look into. It's going to assist us because we've seen repeated patterns of threat actors. The same thing. You would say, no, they won't use the same thing. They will use another thing. Infrastructure is not small, right? It's not cheap. So yeah, there is high chances that they will reuse their infrastructure. Even if they stop using it for a moment and then move on to another one the next, they will surely come to that infrastructure later on. And you never can tell whether that is the one that is going to affect your own organization or not. So there are many different obstacles, language, accessibility. Many people are not aware of where to go for this intel. Many people don't know about some forums and all of that. So accessibility is part of it. And because of that, we need to belong to community. We need to talk to people that are really, really doing the thing. I'm not saying the people that are talking, right? The people that are really doing it and all of that. So, and I believe that once this is well done, we can overcome all of that. So that is it from my side.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Olajim. Okay. That's quite true. That's really helpful. Once again, to everyone listening, you can ask your questions. Just drop it in the chat box, and we'll read it when the time is come. So thank you very much once again. I think we can just okay. Let's just hear from one or two of our speakers before we call it a wrap.
Okay, moving on to the next question. As Elizabeth mentioned, whatever happens to your neighbor, there's a high potential that also happened to you. So my next question is for Mr. Samuel. What would effective collaboration between regulators, compliance teams, and security operations look like in practice to improve data protection across Africa?
All right. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for that insights by Elizabeth. Okay, so what would a typical collaboration between regulators, compliance team, and security operations look like? You know, outside of Nigeria, within Nigeria, or anywhere, right? So the thing is, these three core components need to work together, especially when we're talking about privacy. In fact, beyond privacy, because at one point you need to have people who are um, trunking out regulations that are just beyond oh, we have to put documents together, we have to do all of those, right? So our regulators are needed, whether we like it or not, right? Because they are definitely needed, we need them. They, on one hand, would go out all out with the legal requirements. They let us know how that requirement would affect business, because at the end of the day, organizations, business typically exist first. Every of this privacy regulation, every of the information security regulations, incidents, standards, and all of that typically just exist to enable the business, right? So when you talk about collaboration, it has to be practical, it has to be continuous, it has to be grounded in reality. So it's not as though, oh, we are in year 2026 and Africa is, sending out regulations that looks as though we are in, 1990 or something, right? So that's why it has to be regulations that are practical. So on their own hand, we want to I don't want to say beg, but they're just to ensure that regulators focus on not just telling us to put documentations in place, but then how would their regulations, how would their acts being passed into law focus on how privacy operates in real system? That's one way. For the compliance team, what people like us would do is we sit with those regulations. We digest them, we look at them very well, and then we're able to translate them into operational rules that the security teams can implement, right? In Africa, generally, like I said, that collaboration has to go beyond just there's an issue of resource constraint, there's an issue of maturity difference. Like the example I gave, everyone is moving with AI now, and then we're still battling with some very basic rules or laws, right? But then that handshake just needs to happen. Our regulators need to ensure that they dish out adequate, effective, and suitable regulations. The compliance team would act as, translators in quotes. We don't just have to write policies. We need to ensure that we are able to translate that law or regulation into actual operations. What should be the process steps? What are the control requirements? What typical rules do we need to put in place? How do you measure outcome also? Because most times controls are put together, but then when it comes to measuring the outcome of that control, it becomes a problem, right? So when compliance translate that, the security team needs to swing into action, right? So they're embedding everything privacy into technical controls, areas where there are issues, purpose limitation, consent, access restriction, monitoring inappropriate use, right? Use cases need to be set anywhere. You ensure that you're able to pick up inappropriate use based on what the policy says, supporting data subject rights also. So those technical implementations can be put together. So if this doesn't happen, definitely there's going to be a disjoint, right? So it's just to ensure that all hands are on deck. Our regulators are giving us those policies. The compliance teams are translating it into what should form actual technological practices and processes in-house, and the technology team, or now the security operations team, right? They are factoring in that into their own technical controls. So I think this is one way we can ensure, or what a typical collaboration would look like. That's cross-collaborative actions between every of the core owners, regulators, compliance, and also the security operations.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you very much. Yes, so I think we'll just ask our final question from our the threat hunter in the house. So, Miss Elizabeth, is for you. Just to wrap it up, you said a whole lot about tools, about the vulnerability intelligence, and all of that operationalization. So, just quickly, what false sense of security do organizations often get from their security tools when it comes to protecting personal data?
Okay, I think that's a very straight question. um, Organizations believe that once they have EDR, some of them does not even have the EDR. Some of them have the traditional antivirus. Once they have that and they're able to deploy one small SIM within their environment, they are cool. They don't have to disturb themselves again. But in reality, it is not. Another organization might look at themselves like, oh, we've got the money for cybersecurity. We've got the money. We've got a lot of budgets, right? And we can do quite a lot. We've got our SIM in place. We've got EDR. In fact, we have some anti-distributed denial of service attack on board. We've got so many vulnerability scanner, the Nessus of this world, the Qualys of this world, and all of that. So we're perfect. They fail to realize that it is not enough to clean your house. It is also good, and it is necessary to understand what is going on in the streets. I'll say that again. It is not enough to lock your house, to clean your house, to say, oh, my house is clean and all of that. It is also important to understand what is going on the streets. In your house, everywhere might look calm, but on the street, there might be a protest somewhere. And the same thing goes together with security. So when we talk about security, you may think that you have your house in order, but somebody out there on the dark web is selling your data unknowingly to you. What will you do? Imagine you say to yourself, I've got all the security in place. I'm doing all my best at this point in time and all of that. But somehow, a threat actor is busy doing deep reconnaissance on your environment and is finding so many attack surface unmanaged. So that is why I say that this is a straightforward answer, right? So it is not enough to keep your house safe. You need to ensure that you are at alert and you know what is going on the streets, and also understand how applicable is what is going on the streets to you. So people might be protesting out there. It might not touch you. It might not be of impact. Of course, you need to check your impact assessment, do your impact assessment and all. But then, if you don't know, if you're not aware that something is going on the streets, then you're a dead man, So many organizations are like that. They believe that once they have the tools, they have everything. It's not about the tools. It's about the process. It's about the people. And also, it's about what is going on outside the world against you. So it is not your organization against the organization. It is the global world against the organization. It is the global threat actor world against the organization. It's not about the petty agberos. Permit me to use that word for people that are not Nigerians or that are not living in Nigeria. It's not about dealing with the petty talks around you. You also need to understand what the weather forecast is saying for your organization. You also need, I mean, when I talk about weather, I'm not talking about the weather. I'm talking about the security weather. You need to understand that. You need to be able to pick signals of what could potentially happen to your organization in the next one day. You need to be able to read weathers as well, to read security weathers. Something is going on in the world. I remember some years ago when it was a movie attack. I think that should be 2 years ago. Everywhere was everywhere. My chief was very, very, he was panicking. I was saying, no, man, just calm down. We don't have that in the environment. So that is one thing to be, it's one thing to understand your house. It's another thing to be streetwise when it comes to this security thing. You need to be streetwise, actually. You need to understand what is going on there and how it affects you. And also, it will help you to stay proactive. So there are so many things that the traditional organization think that they are doing right. Oh, we are good. And the next thing, boom, one threat actor is selling their data, selling the data of their customers. Something happened I think this should be 3 years ago, in one of the leading insurance company in this country. And they said they were fine. I was so hungry when I saw that thing. I picked it up, and because we use these guys, I'm like, we need to know, are we impacted and all of that. We had to do the containment ourselves in our own instance, because we have to find out by ourselves what the impact is. But these guys said, oh, they are good, everything is secure and safe, but their strategy document is outside there. I've got some samples. Their business strategies, how they run their things is there. Their financial world is outside there. But they said they are good. They did not receive any indicator of compromise. So I mean, that's somewhat a traditional organization, and they are missing it out big time. So that's why I say you need to be streetwise. You need to understand what is going on there and ensure that you are proactive in responding to some of those things. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Elizabeth. That's a good one. We need to be streetwise. Okay. I've noted that down. I think we have a question. Please, Dami, can you check? I think we have a question in the chat box from Mr. Raymond. Can you just read it out?
Okay, question. If my personal data is misused by a company, let's say a Nigerian company, because of my location, what practical steps can I take? I think, Mr. Samuel, if you could please help us answer this question.
Okay, all right. So I'd say there are about 5 things that can be done in this instance, because you're a data subject, and that's why they're able to handle your data. So organizations are either processors or collectors. So if they do any of this, it means they have the ultimate responsibility to ensure that your data is protected, right? However, if your personal data is being misused, first thing to do is ensure that you document what happened immediately. So if it's something that you need to take a screenshot of the message, what's the date, what's the time of contact, what's the company name, what platform was involved, did you give your consent or you didn't give your consent? So first and foremost, you need to ensure that you document what happened. The second thing to do is to formally contact the organization. So I'm not talking about just their customer care, you're chatting them up on maybe Twitter, right, or X as they call it. You may decide to write a formal letter or formal email addressed to their DPO, because every organization in Nigeria, if you're a controller or processor of data, you are mandated to have a data protection officer or a compliance unit, at least in that organization. And when you go to their website, it's just part of mandate. If they've gone through the typical audits, the name of the DPO, the contact, how you can reach out to the DPO. So the second step will be to ensure that you write a formal letter. So you have to clearly state what happened, what you want. If you want deletion, if you want explanation from what happened, if you want correction, if you want access and all of that, you'd ensure you write that mail to them, right? And then, by writing that, you're typically just trying to exercise your data subject rights, NDPC, let's use the act now, the NDPA typically gives you enforceable rights. It's not a favor. The company is not doing you a favor. So you can request access to your personal data. You can request them to correct inadequate data. You can ask them to delete. You can ask them to even explain on what basis are they processing your data, right? So by virtue of writing that letter, you are typically just trying to exercise your data subject rights. Now, the fourth thing I would say is just give them a considerable, reasonable response window. Some of them would typically state it. If you look at the privacy policy on their website, so they will state it to say, okay, we would respond maybe 7 to 14 days, we'll respond in 3 days and all of that, right? So you give them that reasonable response window. Now, if they don't respond to you, the next best thing to do, which is the fifth step, is to escalate it to the commission itself, the Nigerian Data Protection Commission. And I know they take things like this very serious. So you can send an email to them. What they will do is they will investigate your complaint. So you send every of those evidences you got. So they would investigate it. Because they are the regulator now in this instance, they can request explanation from the company who is misusing your data. They can even impose fines or sanction on them, right? So all of these are what needs to be done. I'll say those are typically the 5 steps. But then, beyond the fact that we know we have certain rights, you also as a data subject, you want to be sure that you are reducing further exposure, right? If it's maybe a marketing email that you've subscribed to, you may need to opt out. If it's something around compromised password, you want to ensure that you change it. You just need to be cautious about sharing data in the future. But I'm sure when you do all of this, if they don't respond, definitely the commission will pick it up. They are very active. They will pick it up and then take it off from there typically. So these are what can be done. Raymond, I hope I've been able to help.
Oh, I think that was a good one. Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. All right, I think we've come to an end. We've come to the end of this webinar, and for me, it's been a good one. It's been an exciting one. We talked about a lot of things, starting from understanding the major gaps in incident response. Talked about the CIA. Mr. Sam said privacy is not a regulatory artifact. Yes, I wrote that down. And then Mr. Daniel also said incident response is not just about the company, it's not just about stopping it, but it's about protecting the people and their data. And then finally, Miss Elizabeth said it's not just about cleaning your house, but you have to be alert and understand what's going on out in the streets and how it's applicable to you. Thank you very much. That's a very, very good one. And once again, this particular webinar was brought to you guys by Cyber Plural. If you want to know about what we do, you can just scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to our page and you get to see a whole lot about us. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, and even on X, which is formerly Twitter. So if it's trying to learn about cybersecurity or understanding compliance or looking into monitoring, pen testing, just to ensure you're having the right security posture, we are your best bet, and you can just reach out to us and then we'll take it up from there. So before we close this particular session, we would like a closing remark from our speakers. I think Mr. Daniel had to leave earlier, and so we'll just take the closing remark from Mr. Sam and Ms. Elizabeth. So it's ladies first, so we'll start with Ms. Elizabeth. Please just give us your closing remark, and then Mr. Sam, and then we'll close this wonderful session.
I mean, is Sam going first or I am going first?
Ladies first, please. I
Okay.
won't even allow that.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm sure you all have learned one thing or the other, right? Um, I mean, I think my closing remark will just be that privacy is not a product of security. It is built in security. It might sound like it is the after product of security to say, okay, once we are secure, we show that we're ensuring privacy. But I'm saying that we should embed it into our security process, because at the end of the day, it can tarnish all the works that we've done. And also, I'm still going to repeat this to say that don't feel too confident with your security. Don't be overconfident about your security to say nothing is happening to me outside my organization. So many organizations have said that and they ended up in mess because a particular threat actor is busy selling their data without their knowledge. And many of them don't involve a threat intelligence department. They don't involve a threat intelligence program, right? And I believe these are some of the things that CyberPrise is offering organizations. So if your organization cannot afford to set up a threat intelligence program from scratch, they can actually outsource it, right? And lastly, I would say that it takes a whole lot for an organization to be secure. It takes a whole lot to ensure that you abide by all form of standards, rules, and regulation. It's not all about your EDR, your firewall in the game. Life has moved past that. And I hope that is a clear message to everybody here. All right, thank you so much for having me. Okay, I'm done. Sam, you can do
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Mr. Samuel, over to you, please.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for that. Right. So for me, if there's one thing I'd really like to leave us with today, is just to say that privacy, typically in the real sense, does not fail because we don't have the laws. You know, the laws exist. Privacy don't fail because we don't have the policies. You know, there's ChatGPT. They can just ask it to generate a privacy policy for you, right? So it doesn't fail because of the lack of these two things. It typically fails because of how we design our systems, right? How we reward our teams. If you build a system with privacy in mind from the onset of even requirement gathering, what that means is at least you're factoring privacy. It will help you to ensure that your privacy controls don't fail, right? Across Africa, Nigeria inclusive, the next phase of data protection maturity is not more documents. You know, it's not about chunking out documents. It's just more about discipline. Discipline in how we collect data, discipline how data is being accessed, discipline on how we share data, discipline on how data is being retained in the organization, and then lastly, you know, discipline on deletion. This is one area that I know organizations fail a lot, right? So the truth is, when privacy works in practice, the customer at the other end is typically invisible to them, but then it will be very, very visible in how the organization operates, right? And this ought to be the standard that we should be aiming for at every area of what we do, the systems we develop and all of that. So that would be my, 2 cents. And I'd also like to say thank you to the Cyber Plural team for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you very much. Nice.
All right. On behalf of myself and my co-host and the Cyber Plural team, we say a very big thank you to our speakers, Mr. Samuel, Ms. Elizabeth, and Mr. Daniel, and to all our wonderful, awesome listeners. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I hope we've been able to enjoy the session and learn a thing or two. Look forward to our forthcoming sessions and we'll keep you all updated. Thank you very much. Do have a wonderful evening. Have a great day.